I am Dr. Ed Baker. I have had the pleasure and have been blessed to be at Chesapeake for a total of 51 years. Um, I had 43 years as a full-time professor. And during my tenure at Chesapeake, I started out by being head basketball coach for 9 years. I started in 1971. And then I went into the classroom, spent 8 years as an administrator. Felt my goal at that time was I wanted to be a college president someday, and that's what I got my doctorate in, and I was planning to do that, and then I realized that this administration stuff was not me. I enjoyed the classroom. I enjoyed the whites of the students' eyes and their ability to express themselves, and loved teaching. So I went back into the classroom. As I said, 43 years total. And then in 2014, I spent another 8 years online teaching 2 classes a semester, and realized that I was not an online professor as well. So I decided then to retire. Really, of course, enjoyed my time. We came here, crossed the Bay Bridge in July of '71 in a U-Haul. My oldest daughter was 4. My youngest was 1 month, and she was being held by my wife as we came across. And I'm very proud to say that my oldest daughter now is a full professor in our nursing program, just finished her doctorate, so she's keeping on the legacy and the tradition of the Baker family. So I'm very, very proud of her, and like I said before, it was an absolute blessing to come here and spend my time here, and just loved every second of it.
Great.
When I first came to Chesapeake, we were associated with only 4 counties at the time. And then Dorchester came in right after that. We did a lot in the community. We went out to various situations and spoke. And that's one of the things that I did on a regular basis. I would go out and I would speak to organization breakfasts, main dinners, and stuff like that. I developed a reputation, and I was able to do that throughout my career. And I always talked about Chesapeake when I did that. Number one thing that I would say is, you know, when you come up there, you're never going to be a number. You're going to be someone that we know. We're going to associate you with a great advisor, people who really care about you, and people who constantly get a hold of you and say, hey, how are you doing? How's everything academically? How's everything in your life? How's this and that? And I'm very proud to say that I was able to help, literally help, so many students. I mean, almost every day I would have people come and see me about various things, and I don't think a lot of people realize the major concerns of our students. Naturally, there was the physical concerns, but really in the area of emotional and mental and psychological, very hard to explain. But when you have people that really care about students, and Chesapeake had a lot of those, then that helps. And we're able to do that. Well, I had finished my master's degree, then it was called Western Maryland, today it's McDaniel. And the last class that I was taking, this guy knew that one of my goals was to be a college professor and coach. So he came by my desk and he threw this down, and what it was the application for the job at Chesapeake. And at the time, I was teaching in Montgomery County. Now, Montgomery County was the #1 rated county in the United States for paying teachers. And so I had 2 great offers to move from where I was to other high schools to coach. And I was thinking about that, and then I came down for the interview. Jack Sistriano interviewed me, And I really didn't think I'd have that much of a chance, but I ended up, one day the phone rang and he offered me the job, and I said something to my wife, and at that time, in order to come to Chesapeake, I had to take over a $6,000 cut. And in 1971, that was a lot of money. So she said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, this was my goal. I wanted to be a college professor. I wanted to be a college coach. And so I come back and did it and took the job, and it was one of the greatest decisions I ever made in my life, of course. And I had this big center in one of my classes, and he came up to me and he said, Coach, do you give special exams to your players? And I said, son, on Monday when we have our first exam, let me tell you what I'm going to do to you. I'm going to pass everything out to everybody, and I'm going to have one on the bottom for you. And it's going to be 50 questions, all true, false, but I'm going to allow you to put down 2 answers for each question. And he put his head down. And I said, what's wrong, son? And he said, I usually don't do that well on true, false. So I knew I was in for a long haul. I was sitting at my desk one day, and the music professor, Billy Grebe was her name, called and she said, I got one of your boys in my class and he's going to fail. And she's going to fail? And she said, yeah, he's been here less than half the time. So I called him in and I said, all right, I got a complaint from your music instructor. She said, you've been there less than half the time. And he looked at me and said, that's not true. I only missed once. I only missed twice, he said. I said, okay, let's go. We're going to her office. So we go into her office, we sit down, she takes out her book and she looks and she said, all right, he missed on this Monday. He missed on this Monday. He has never attended class at all on the Wednesdays. And I looked at him and I said, okay, your turn. And he goes, Wednesday? Wednesday? I said, let's go. And we were gone.
That's amazing.
Well, we just really started out with a strong program. The program really turned over when Dr. Sistriano, took over as athletic director, and he was head basketball coach at the time, and he wanted to hire a new basketball coach so that he could devote his time to being athletic director. And then when I came in, like I said, I coached for 9 years. I was blessed to be very successful. I had some great players. And one of the highlights of my career at Chesapeake, I was in the first class for the Chesapeake College Athletic Hall of Fame. So that was a sensational honor, and that was because of my coaching background. And then it just, like I said, it got to the point that I had to leave that, and it was just too much time away from my family. And so, well, we have changed a lot in athletics over the years. Believe it or not, 2 of our biggest sports way back in that time, we had a swimming pool. And one of my dear friends, Howard Wheeler was his name, was head swimming coach, very successful swimming coach. And he established all kind of records in that area, and he applied for numerous jobs, and all of a sudden, University of Michigan called him and offered him the head swimming coaching job at Michigan. And he was just diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. So he came to me and he said, I can't take that job. He said, I got less than 6 months to live. And so we lost him. And after that, and I thought this was a good decision, by the way. After that, the swimming pool was a white elephant. We were just losing so much money on it. And so when they did some renovation, they just wiped it out and put some other things in there. But we also had a lacrosse team. And that was interesting because Chesapeake had never had anything like that before. Now, the problem with that was very simple. We had to go across the bridge to play, and we had to go to Baltimore to play. And that's the heart of lacrosse. So we weren't able to be successful at all, and then after a while we had to drop it. But we had the standard sports. For the men, we had soccer in the fall, and basketball in the winter, and baseball, of course, in the spring. And for the women, we had volleyball, basketball, and softball. And we had other sports along the way, but those were the main sports, and still to this day, they're the main sports. And Chesapeake is relatively small compared to the other schools that we play, but we have been very, very successful. As a matter of fact, right now, both of our men and women are in the Region 20 tournament, and tomorrow they play for the right to come here. We're hosting it this weekend on Friday for the semifinals and finals on Saturday if we win. So that's sensational that both teams would be at that level. And so Frank Szymanski, and I'll give him a shout out, he has been so successful as the head baseball coach, but he's also the athletic director, and he's done a wonderful job with establishing our athletic program today. One of the things that we were very proud of is we would go out and we would recruit many student athletes who nobody in their family have gone near college. So they didn't understand it, and they were the first time people to do so. And so when we brought them in here, we just had to basically, and by the way, I think that is the strength of a two-year school, especially Chesapeake College. And one of the things that I always told students, I don't care how far you go in the education situation. I don't care if you get 2 doctorates or whatever. You will look back on it and you will find the absolute best and greatest teachers you ever had was at this institution. Because when you are hired at a two-year school, you're hired for your teaching ability. And then as you continue, then it's focused on other things. I remember I got my doctorate, very proud of it, at Virginia Tech. And when I was going to school there, I had some horrible professors. I mean, they'd just come in, and what you would do is check off that course and go on to the next one, but it was a great example of what I was trying to say. And when you go to a 4-year school, and especially at a major university, one of the things that they value and one of the things that they evaluate you with is your publishing ability. Don't care that much about your teaching ability. So when you go there, you got to sort of do it on your own. Well, not at a 2-year school, not at Chesapeake College especially. And not everybody at Chesapeake, at 2-year school, is into the students like we were. We really had a great student support services here. And over the years, it's just amazing to me. I'll give you an example. Right now, one of our vice presidents, Dave Harper, when he came in here as an English professor, they assigned him to me as, to help him out and all that kind of stuff. So he became just an exceptional teacher. Now, one of the problems with administrators, there's many problems with administrators, but one of the problems with administrators is they do such a great job in the classroom, and that allows them to be promoted to being an administrator. Well, then what happens then? It takes them away from the classroom. And so that's what I did, and then I realized that, and that's why I went back to the classroom. But anyway, Dave started that way, and he's now a great vice president. And we have some great administrators at Chesapeake College today. We really do. I know one of the guys that is coming in starting July 1st, Milton Nagel, I believe his name is. He came from the Caroline County system, and my wife retired from Caroline County. She spent 34 years in the public schools over there, and she could not praise Milton anymore. She just loved him, and she said, what a great, great addition to Chesapeake College. I spoke to Frank about our new vice president in his area, and he's very high on her. I can't remember her name, but but she's a good one. And then Cliff, our president, great job. And I'll tell you something that I'm real proud of. I literally served at this institution under every single president of Chesapeake College. The very first one was Dr. George Silver, and then we moved through to so many others. And I developed a great, great friend, Jack Catula, who he will be 92 this year, and he's in a help home over in Delaware. And I call him every week and talk to him, and he's just a great guy. So we became really good friends because he was from the Pittsburgh area, and I was too. And so I'm very proud to be a Yinzer. And so it was all good. But I think the world of Cliff. I would sit out at baseball or softball games and talk to him about his family and everything that's going on in his life. And he just seems like the type of person that Chesapeake College would need for a president. And I'm sure he's done a great job. See, the student body today, and this is interesting because I just found this out, the student body today, our highest percentage of FTE generation, for an example, comes from our dual enrollment students. And those are people in the high school that are eligible to take classes. Now, every class that I taught at the end of my career here, I had many dual enrollment students in it. And so that program, which has allowed them to come up here, and really tuition was incredible for them. And I know of at least 2 students that I had that graduated from Chesapeake College in May and then graduated from their high school in June of the same year. But they spent their junior and senior year totally taking classes at Chesapeake. I don't know if I would recommend that or not, because there's a lot to do in your junior and senior year when you're in high school. But anyway, excuse me, that is one thing that I saw developing over the years. The other thing that I think Chesapeake did very well is we had so many senior citizens that we brought in, and they would come into the class all scared and everything and not sure what to do. So we would give them the basic skills tests and say, don't worry about it, we'll get you through. You might have to take an extra math or an extra English class, non-credit, in order to get the proper background to be successful. But in the end, that's what we want you to do. I'll tell you a great story about that. One of my first people that I ever recruited, he was older than me, and he was playing in the local basketball recreational leagues. And I went into him, he had a custodial job. And I went into him and tried to recruit him. And he said, no, I have a couple kids and I just couldn't do it financially. And I said, well, let me see what I can do. Well, back then, he had the GI Bill and was very strong. And we had the Pell Grant, and I put everything together in a work-study job up here and everything. And I brought it down and showed it to him, and I said, here, this is the amount that you can actually make going to Chesapeake College. Well, it was more than what he was being paid. So he came up here, played 2 years for me in basketball. At the end of his career, and this is a great story, he was one of these kind of people that when he had to read a chapter, it might take him a long time to do it, but he would do it, and he would learn how to take notes, and I would teach students how to take exams, believe it or not, and I think there's a theory behind that of what to do. So I worked with him, and he worked so hard, and he graduated. Now, I knew that he didn't really want to go to a 4-year school, but at that time, the federal government had this push going on where they wanted to hire some minorities. And so he applied for a job at the Easton Post Office. And he went in and applied, and when they looked at the minority applicants, they saw, oh, here's a young man with a 2-year degree from Chesapeake College. We're going to hire him. And so what happened? Well, what happened was he got a great job with the federal government. He got great benefits. He made more than me. He built a new house. He bought a new car. And just recently, he has retired from that job and has a great pension. And so there's a great, great example of what Chesapeake College can do for someone, because I was just so proud of him because he wouldn't have ever had the opportunity to do that. One of the things I always told my students, because most of them would look at you and say, well, I don't know what to major in, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know what to do after Chesapeake and so forth. And I said, let me tell you what to do. I said, I can't tell you exactly what it's going to be, but you find a career that when it's real cold and it's real windy and it's really tough to get up in the morning, but you can get up with a semi-smile on your face to go to your job. I said, that's the job you want. Now, I can't tell you what that job's going to be, but that's the job. And every single morning for 43 years, I woke up like that and with a smile on my face and couldn't wait to go to Chesapeake and teach and get involved with students and people that were here. And so, that's the best thing I can say about Chesapeake. How many people can go through life and have a job like that? I was blessed, and there's no better way to say it than that. This course that I taught called Wellness for Life, we did everything from sex, drugs, and rock and roll all the way through. And in there, you would sit there and you would talk about relationships, you would talk about just being a better person and so forth. And I think that's something that Chesapeake College offers, Not everybody does that, but when you come through a 2-year school, especially one like Chesapeake, you have the opportunity to learn so much more than the basic academic standards of an institution. And I think that's where we're really strong. Well, the first thing I would say is happy birthday. And I'm so glad that you started here way back in the day. I remember, I wasn't part of it, but I remember the very first classes that Chesapeake College ever offered was at the Kennard Center in Centerville. And we hired a group of, Dr. Silver hired a group of people to start out, I think about a half a dozen faculty members. And as a matter of fact, just recently we lost one, Dr. Gribben. And Dr. Roberta Gribben, I called her Robin. That was something that she preferred to be called. And she was an original. She was from the very, very beginning. And they taught over there, and then finally they bought this land and they opened up. And I think the first buildings were opened in '72. That sounds about right. And then we just kept adding and adding and adding to get to where we are today. But that just shows you how Chesapeake has grown over the 60 years. And I'm sure that the future is bright, and naturally with all the new technologies and other things that are going on. But we are adjusting to that, which is good. And the key is to have great people, and we're blessed to have great people. And so I think the future of Chesapeake is really good, and I don't know how longer I will be here, but I think that they deserve a big birthday party for their 60th birthday.